Hi, everyone. It's Connie Chung-Jo, the CEO of Asian Americans Advancing Justice LA. And today I invited a guest to join me to talk about the recent announcement by the White House of Julie Su as the next Deputy Director of Labor. So, Aileen, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here. I am the Vice President of Development and Communications. I have a long history here at the organization. I was here for 20 years, starting in 1989, and returned to the organization about 3 years ago. I was actually here when Julie started. She came to the organization as a Skadden Arps Fellow with a project in hand to focus on immigrant low-income workers, particularly in the restaurant sector. She started as a staff attorney. She initially was really trying to reach out to restaurant workers and inform them of their rights.
Soon after that, I know the Thai El Monte sweatshop case happened. Could you tell us a little bit about that case?
So the case came to Advancing Justice almost by accident. Our then founder and executive director happened to have a neighbor who was working at a state entity who was getting ready to conduct a raid on this facility where they had heard that workers had been enslaved. And they believed that the workers were Thai. So Stuart's neighbor was actually looking for Thai translators. So Stuart reached out to both Julie, who was starting to be engaged in workers' rights kinds of cases and issues, as well as the folks at Thai CDC, Chancey Martorell, who went along with them to the raid with her volunteers to help translate and let workers know what was happening. Initially, after the raid, the workers that were found at these facilities were actually put into detention because they were all undocumented workers and were then scheduled to be deported back to Thailand. Julie, kind of leading a number of other community advocates, worked really passionately to get them released from deportation and then not only represent them in terms of immigration proceedings to allow them to stay in the United States, but also looking at ways to hold the sweatshop operators as well as the retailers and manufacturers that profited from their labor accountable for what had happened to all the workers. Traditionally, that lawsuit should have just been brought against the sweatshop owners. Mm-hmm. But I think that we all recognize that more often than not, the sweatshop owners have limited resources. And ultimately, the real money is made from the manufacturers and retailers that ultimately sell these garments. So Julie was very clear that she felt like the retailers and manufacturers had to be held liable. So the suit also named those different entities. And over the course of that process, created a legal precedent that would stop retailers and manufacturers from hiding from their responsibility to these workers.
So Julie led this litigation against
yes, she did.
Mega companies, all the big brand name manufacturers. We know of all the main clothing, mm-hmm. right?
Yes.
But, how old was Julie or how long has she been practicing at this point? And
Julie was probably like in her maybe second, maybe third year here at Advancing Justice. This case did play out over a significant period of time, but she was still a relatively young attorney when she ultimately brought that case. And I will also say that she brought that case despite a lot of feedback that she had gotten from other veteran attorneys that it is a case that she could not win. But I think that part of it, maybe being a young attorney and having a very strong sense of justice and loyalty to the workers that she was representing, and also having a really clear sense of the way that the garment industry was broken and the reform that really needed to happen, she was not dissuaded. And she did win, actually. There's a settlement of over $4 million that was awarded to the workers. It also opened up legal responsibility to manufacturers and retailers throughout the state of California.
And tell me about on the immigration side, because you said these Thai workers were brought out and put into detention and they were supposed to be deported?
Yes.
Now why was that? And what did she do about that situation?
The garment workers were all undocumented. The trafficking of workers into different sectors of the U.S. economy is not a new thing. Julie, as well as so many other advocates that were working with her, were able to leverage some tools that were very limited and then also open them up to allow for the workers to be able to stay in the United States. Some of them were here to serve as witnesses against the sweatshop operators and the retailers and manufacturers, to be able to kind of protect their own interests and then create this kind of reform.
Now, when you say that these Thai workers were in sweatshop conditions and they were enslaved, what does that mean?
They were in an apartment complex that was surrounded by barbed wire. There were armed guards there. They were packed into a room, 10 people in one bedroom, kind of with little mats on the floor. They had some sections of the apartment complexes where they were forced to sew. So they were just kind of having to stay within the complex, going from wherever it is that they were allowed to sleep for a few hours back to the other sections of the apartment complex where they were forced to produce these garments.
And were they able to come in and out of the apartment?
They were not. And they were not really paid because any salary that they had earned, the sweatshop owners then kept to be able to buy them minimal amounts of food and other kinds of things that they needed to be able to live in that complex. And they were not really able to communicate with people outside of that complex. One of the important things about the case was not only its focus on freeing these workers who had been imprisoned, but also recognizing the exploitation that was happening with a far larger number of workers who were being exploited in front shops, because ultimately all of these garments had to kind of come in to the sector in some legitimate way. So the operators also had front shops with smaller groups of Latino workers who were not enslaved, but were also being exploited. The reform that happened in the garment industry was probably one of the most important legacies of that case. Oftentimes, sweatshops that are also run by other immigrant owners that are forced to then exploit other workers to be able to meet the demands of manufacturers and retailers for low-cost products that they eventually sell in retail stores at a much increased markup rate, allowed for certain people to really profit and have no responsibility for the conditions through which those products are made. So not only did the case create some legal precedent to hold manufacturers and retailers accountable, but Julie also worked on the policy side to ensure that there were laws that were put in place that continue to strengthen that liability. Julie continues to have a very strong interest in protecting the rights of low income workers. So when she eventually left Advancing Justice, she went into the public sector and joined the state government as the labor commissioner. And she had a much larger platform in which she could continue to protect the rights of not just low income workers, but all workers. And I think that it's been very important for her to ensure that all workers are treated with respect and dignity and really are able to feel secure in the work that they do on behalf of so many of us that benefit from their labor.
Aileen, why do you think she'll be good as the next Deputy Director of Labor?
I think her experience working at the state level, particularly in a state as complex and diverse as California, will really serve the country well. I think she is an advocate at heart and has a passion and an interest in protecting the rights of workers. At the same time, I think that she's learned to be able to balance that with the interest of many entrepreneurs and business owners that are working and driving our economy. I think she's very clear in her belief that the success of business does not have to come with the exploitation of workers. And both of those can be celebrated and cared for in a respectful way. And I'm excited for Julie to have this opportunity to be able to kind of bring that to a national level.
Is there anything else about Julie you want to share with us, personality-wise, or that we could know?
Well, Julie is a very good friend, and I am so excited for where her work will continue to bring her. She's incredibly passionate. She's a role model for so many young advocates. I guess the other thing that I might say is she loves Rocky movies and can pretty much relay any of the dialogue from those movies from memory if you give her half a chance to do that. She obviously is very committed to her work and spends a lot of time doing that. But we want to encourage her to have fun as well when she can.
Thanks, Eileen, so much for your time and for telling us a little bit more about Julie Sue, who we want to congratulate as becoming our soon-to-be Deputy Director of Labor.
Yes, we are incredibly proud of her, and I can't wait to see what she does next.
That's great. Thank you so much.